Well, I want to turn now to two natural disasters devastating North Africa. Just days after a deadly earthquake struck Morocco, Libya is reeling from crippling floods that have washed away entire neighborhoods. And I want to turn first to Libya, where officials are calling the floods unprecedented and catastrophic. At least 2,000 people are dead, and it's estimated some 10,000 may be missing after Storm Daniel dumped torrential rain across the country's northeast. Authorities say two dams collapsed, sending raging water gushing into already flooded areas. The city of Derna was especially hard hit. An official there says all hospitals in the city are out of service, and there are fears that aid efforts may be hampered by the political fractures in Libya, which is in the grips of a years-long power struggle between the two rival administrations. And as the planet warms, forecasters predict more extreme rainfall and more severe flooding. CNN meteorologist Derek Van Dam is standing by for us in Atlanta. We've also got Ben Wedeman following the developments, following those from Rome. Good to have you both with us. First to you, Ben. It really is hard to understand the magnitude of this disaster with so many villages seemingly wiped out, an estimated 10,000 people missing. What more can you tell us about the storm and the dams that burst its banks?
Well, what we understand, Lynda, is that there were two dams in the Wadi, or the normally dry riverbed, that goes through Derna to the Mediterranean. Those dams, according to one scientific study, had needed to be maintained, but because Libya was convulsed in 2011 by the uprising against Muammar Gaddafi, and then that followed by that wars between the East and the West, perhaps the infrastructure wasn't being very well maintained. Now, this Storm Daniel, dumped the equivalent of 8 months of rain in this area of eastern Libya in just one day. So we've seen video that would appear that those dams burst, sending a tsunami of muddy water right through the middle of this city. Now, we've heard from one doctor from Benghazi who made it to Derna, and keep in mind that the roads are almost impassable because many of them were washed out by the flooding. Nonetheless, this doctor made it, and he said that the hospitals there are barely functioning, that the emergency services aren't working, and that ordinary people are out scavenging, or rather looking for and collecting rotting bodies. In fact, we have seen video from outside the morgue, which is reportedly full to capacity. Outside it are dozens of bodies covered in blankets. And it appears that the authorities really are struggling to try to get a grip on the situation. That they simply they weren't prepared for a catastrophe of this magnitude. And in fact, just within the last hour or so, on the Facebook page of the municipality of Derna, they've put out a message saying the situation in the city is out of control. We need international intervention. Now, there is help on the way. The Turks, according to Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, have sent 3 planes, including well over 100 search and rescue personnel, as well as equipment. The rival government based in Tripoli in the west has sent a plane load of emergency workers or medical personnel as well. But it appears that the magnitude of this disaster is going to require a lot more than that at the moment. Lynda?
And Ben, of course, at the best of times, Libya is hampered by political division and instability with two rival governments, one in Tripoli and, of course, one in the east, including Derna. How is that disconnect adding to the problems as you see rescue workers trying and aid groups trying to get in to help those affected?
Well, it basically, you have various countries in the region and beyond supporting one side or the other. So we've seen that, for instance, Egypt and Turkey, which support the government in the east, seem to have jumped to in the case of Turkey, to actually providing concrete aid. Egypt is providing rhetorical support, so to speak. But the government in Tripoli is internationally recognized for what that's worth. And therefore, it's easier to access that part of the country. In the East, not so much. So it's difficult, for instance, for journalists to get there without a lot of paperwork. And for aid organizations as well, it's going to prove quite a challenge. In addition to the fact that this is a country of 6 million people floating on a sea of oil, but since 2011, it has been completely distracted from recovering from years of dictatorial rule by Muammar Gaddafi, by this infighting. So even though in theory the resources should be there to build a prosperous country, the country has been so divided, there's been so much foreign intervention backing one side or another against the other, that the country has just gone backwards over the last 12 years. And we see it in its incapacity when it comes to dealing with a disaster like this. Lynda?
Yeah, Ben Wedeman for us. We appreciate your perspective. Thanks so much for joining us. I want to bring in our meteorologist, Derek Van Dam now. Derek, why has Storm Daniel been so devastating, and explain the climate conditions that make Libya and its coast so vulnerable?
Yeah, I think Ben really described it best, Lynda, when he talked about this tsunami of water that was literally going through Derna as the two dams collapsed. Ultimately, too much water for the infrastructure to hold, and it is all because of Storm Daniel, which you kind of see on this rate. This is actually a satellite loop taken over a 7-day period. Remember, this is the same storm system that brought the heavy flooding rains to central and eastern Greece. And then it started to drift further and further south. It took advantage of the very warm, above average temperatures of the Mediterranean. It actually got tropical characteristics, so we call this a medicane, like a hurricane in the Mediterranean, and then ultimately walloped the northeastern sections of Libya. And this is where this catastrophic amount of rain fell in a dry area that is typically dry this time of year. We'll show you the climatological averages, but El Bayada is actually just to the west of Derna, where the dams collapsed. And this is important because there's a river basin that goes between this area, and that received 414 millimeters of rain in just one day. So why in the world do we still see these heavy rain events occurring across the planet, from China to Europe to places like North Africa and in the United States? Well, remember, we have warmed about 1.2 degrees Celsius since the pre-industrial averages. So what that in turn has done is allowed our atmosphere to hold more water vapor. More water vapor brings the potential for more extreme rain events. Now, in terms of northern Libya, North Africa, we're typically in our dry season. So getting a medicane moving off of the Mediterranean this time of the year is out of the ordinary. We don't normally see the rain this time of year. And so to get that amount of precipitation in such a short period of time, unfortunately, Lynda, it led to the scenes that we are witnessing on our TV screens today.
Yeah, absolutely shocking scenes. Derek Van Dam, we appreciate it. Thanks so much.